Calling to order at whatever time Helen says it is.
6:49.
6:49. The governing, the public budget hearing for the Creighton Governing Board, and I think we will start by immediately recognizing Mr. Scott Walmer.
Mr. President, members of the Governing Board, good evening. This hearing is required by statute immediately before the action item to adopt our budget for the 2013-2014 school year. Please note that we proposed this budget, or it was compiled even before the state had finished its business, so it is built on a number of forecasts, including one of those, for example, is it's compiled based upon an assumption that the rule allowing us to calculate our override as though full-day kindergarten were still funded was still in place, and it's not. That was taken out of the final bill. So those things will be amended in September. There's a provision to do a September amendment in cases where legislation gets done late. And that also will impact the tax rates that I've forecast, because they were also built upon that assumption. And so that'll get revised in September as well.
And for those, I don't think anyone here has their monitors on, so that might be why we didn't see what you were talking about. So everyone turn on the monitors. Thank you. I was looking for the presentation in Word docs.
It's on there?
It's much more compelling.
Yes, but it was probably under where I wasn't looking. Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
So some charts that show kind of what we do and where funding comes from, etc. M&O, of course, is our biggest single fund. That capital budget of $2.1 million, third from the top, it's worthy of note that about $1 million of that is carry forward, and the rest is our allocation for the year. We started 4 years or so ago with $2 to $3 million in carry forward, so we've weathered this full downturn reduction kind of number of years on that carry forward, and that's what we're down to. Also, of material interest is the classroom site fund budget is about $800,000 greater than last year. That's good news for teachers whose pay for performance comes from that. We've been able to increase that this year from $1,500 last year to $1,800 possible dollars next year, and that's likely to increase into the coming years. The M&O budget is divided from amongst regular education, special education, and transportation, and this chart is very similar to last year's, percentage-wise particularly. This one as well, in fact, salaries and benefits continue to comprise 87% of the M&O budget, with just a little bit for supplies and services. Benefits this year went up along with salaries with a 1.8% increase, because ASRS ticked up a little bit to match that. So again, that remains 87% of the M&O budget. By function, classroom instruction is up a little bit to 57% this year from 55.3% last year. The reason for that is when you apply a pay increase of a percentage, it impacts the salary-heavy functions more so than some of the others that might be more service-oriented. For example, PPS is down a bit from 15.4%. That's physical plant or property management. Physical plant is a 13.5%. Last year it was 15.4%. So more of their money goes to contractors and people who monitor the fire system and the burglar alarms, the security stuff, and so that's not part of salary and benefits. So instruction is impacted more by pay increases than some of the others. So physical plant is second. Student support those are folks who work directly with students but who are not teachers, so psychiatrists or psychologists, nurses, people like that. School administration, that of course is the school office, the principal, the assistant principal, and the office staff at the school. Central services is next. That's the business office, human resources, and technology departments. Transportation, of course. Next is teacher support. That is professional development and some of the departments that are related to curriculum and special ed services as well. District administration, that's central administration that runs the district as a whole. And then non-instructional is, we do support food services in terms of a match. The federal monies that we get for food services requires a matching expenditure. That's what that is, so that's non-instructional in nature. This is a reconciliation of the budget from May 15th that we just amended the 12-13 budget for the last time. So the difference between that and this budget that we're proposing tonight starts with a reduction to the career ladder budget. This year career ladder is funded at 2% of the support level. Traditionally it was 5%, and it's on a 5-year phase out. So 2013 it'll get 2%, and the year following that it'll get 1%, and then it will be gone. So that's a reduction in funding to that program of $260,000. The support level, the amount of money that we get for M&O per student increased 1.8% this year, and that resulted in almost $500,000 for the district. We increased enrollment for the first time in a number of years, and that resulted in about $330,000. Our override increased, but like I said before, I calculated that based upon the assumption that we were going to be able to calculate that as though full-day funding were still in place. So when I present you with an amended budget in September, that'll be a decrease rather than an increase. And carry forward both for the Career Ladder program and the district as a whole, clicked up just a little bit to arrive at our new budget, our new M&O budget of $33.2 million.
Scott, can you explain how we have a reduction in career ladder support at the same time we have an increase in carry forward?
Yeah. As Career Ladder phases out, people have exited the program. At the beginning of the phase out, no one was allowed to join after that point. So as people have dropped out, the rate of that dropout has been a little bit different than the decline in funding. And so, that'll all get used up next year. This I've not addressed before at this hearing, but if you saw the Sunday paper, there's a 4-part investigative report coming up, taxation, vexation, all about my property values have declined, but my tax bill has not. And why is that? And there's a lot of misinformation about that. So I just wanted to sort of address that, and that the report continues through Sunday. So I want to look at that. So people are surprised that their assessed valuation falls, but their tax bill does not. Part of that might be the attention that gets put on assessed valuation. You get a card and it's kind of in bold and it shows you what your property has done. More critical parts of that formula are the amount of the budget allocation or the actual levy that's going to be applied to tax rates around the jurisdiction. It actually has more to do with it than the value of an individual property within the jurisdiction. So this example that I have up on the board, it doesn't tie exactly to Creighton's figures, because for simplicity I wanted to assume that the secondary and primary assessed valuations are just kind of all one, because otherwise the example would get really complicated. So if you take our adjusted district allocation, that's our M&O budget, our capital budget, and adjacent ways, if if there were any. That gets adjusted for things like cash on hand, because if we have a cash balance, that's money that we don't have to levy in order to fund our budget for the next year. And budget carry forward, same thing. It also includes voter-approved add-ons like overrides and bond payments that get added to the levy. So if that comes up to $37.6 million, we subtract from that the amount the state's gonna chip in. So that leaves the amount of money that needs to come from the property owners within the district to fund the next year's operation.
And has that changed over the years, Scott? Kind of that percentage there of what is coming from?
The state amount?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be calculated based upon the property valuation of the entire state. So the state does the same kind of gyration that we do in the district, only statewide. And they know what they want to put in, so that's where that results in the qualifying tax rate. And the only time that would not be a straight calculation is if the state does something else, like they reduce that rebate that they used to have. So if they tweak that in any way, that's going to change that qualifying tax rate beyond just a straight calculation. So we subtract the amount that we expect the state to chip in, and that leaves the amount to be funded by property owners within the school district. And this is the most important part of a tax bill. If the levy rises, then most likely so will rise your tax bill as well, any other state action notwithstanding. So the tax rate then is where your assessed valuation comes into play. A tax rate must be applied to the assessed valuation of all district property, and that will generate the required levy. So if the allocation is held equal each year, then the tax rate and the assessed valuation will move in opposite directions in order to generate the same allocation. So quite simply, if your assessed valuation rises, the tax rate to fund the budget will drop, and vice versa. So they just move in opposite directions. So district-wide assessed valuations have fallen this year, so it will take a higher tax rate to generate the same levy before adjusting for things like cash on hand. Question?
So the total tax levy for Creighton for 2013-14, I think this is the $15,230,144. How has that changed in the last year? Presumably as our enrollment goes up or down, that affects how much we are allowed to have as an M&O budget and what gets taxed.
It will, and I've added primary and secondary stuff into this figure, so this is more than just the M&O budget.
Okay.
So for example, our bond principal payment's not the same every year.
Okay.
That changes the levy substantially. Student enrollment and the increase in the base support level all impacts the levy.
Thanks.
So those are all changes for this year.
So you don't know exactly what the 15,230,144 was last year?
No, not offhand.
Okay, thank you.
That's very easy to get for you. So then lastly, the tax bill, you multiply tax rate by 100 to get your tax bill per $100,000 assessed valuation. The state has moved more to expressing that in terms of a $250,000 property. So when you see the pamphlet and things and those things where we have to provide that information, you'll see a $250,000 property, and that makes the extrapolation a little more difficult or easy to picture because it's in different increments, sort of. But that's what you'll see in those pamphlets. So what impacts your tax bill the most isn't the assessed valuation, but changes like we've mentioned, changes to the support level, changes in enrollment, and changes to voter-approved initiatives like overrides or bond issues.
And again, Scott, my house in my neighborhood versus someone else who lives on the other side of the district may not go up or down in terms of their valuation the same each year, correct? So, depending if I'm in a condo or a house, or if it's a commercial property or something, this may be beyond what you're your area is, but not everyone's tax bills are going to go up or down the same, just because you're a property owner.
That's true. The 1 year they assessed the northern part of the district at a different rate than the south. And I don't know how that works. I don't know if they get to certain swaths of towns in certain years to reevaluate, but yeah, it doesn't seem to land equally. But your tax bill will be impacted based upon your relative change in your assessed valuation versus your neighbors or versus anyone else in another part of the district. And yeah, that would be a question for the assessor. So we'll get those phone calls probably in October one way or another, and this is the information that we can provide for that question. And here's the primary assessed valuations for the district that will be applied this year to calculate tax rates. 1, 2, 3, third consecutive year decline. This is the historical primary and secondary tax rates kind of provided separately. And keep in mind that the 2014 amount is estimated. Last year I looked and I was just a little bit high. The actual that gets calculated in August was a little bit lower than what I had put on the proposed budget, because that does include things like a forecasted ending cash balance. It also includes encumbrances, because the more bills you need to pay in July and August for the old year, the more money that you need to bring in to fund that. Well, encumbrances don't always pan out. Work might end up being completed in a future period and be part of a different budget period. So it is estimated, but should be reasonably close, I expect. Those two components total together, just so you can see them kind of from a different angle, and so these two together will comprise someone's tax bill. So that tax rate that I'm forecasting, $4.66. If you take that, multiply it by 100, let's see here. Multiply it times 100 and you'll get your tax bill per $100,000 assessed valuation. Multiply it again by 2.5 to get up to that $250,000 figure. That's what I'm showing you here, and I'm expecting that to decrease just a little bit. Our cash position has improved from last year, and that's the reason for that.
I think that's very handy to have on file, especially right come October, when you can show that for a house, if your valuation stayed the exact same anyway, whether that did or not, we don't have any certainly control over, but for a $250,000 home, the amount that Creighton is, the amount of a property tax that goes to pay for Creighton has gone down.
And that will become official about the first week in August when a little more dust has settled, and we work that out with the county. And that's it for my presentations. Any
Questions?
have any questions about 2013-14 legal budget?
Questions, comments, concerns? If not, then I will entertain I need a motion to adjourn. No, I do not. I just adjourned the special public budget hearing. And